Welcome to Father and Son. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Dad.
Where's your tie? Just because it's 36 degrees outside on this Tuesday morning doesn't mean you shouldn't have a tie on.
I would say at the moment it's more like we're at 41 degrees. It is like an oven in Melbourne at the moment. There is a cool change expected tonight, but I've done the old sort of primary school thing. When I went to school, if it was over 35, we didn't have to wear ties, and I'm doing the same thing now.
Badly taught. I don't change my behaviour. I wear a tie. You can look up my manners segment on this. Even you say it's very, very bad manners not to wear a tie.
Yeah, there's an old
you
saying.
wouldn't be able to get into any of the clubs today, the men's clubs, without your tie on.
There's an old saying
the RACB.
But mad dogs and Englishmen in the noonday sun.
Yeah, that's right. We're out in the noonday sun. Well, we've got a few subjects. We've got the biggest cyclone in maybe Australia's history about to hit Queensland.
Yes, it's astonishing. If you look at a weather map at the moment, it is quite ferocious. The new tropical cyclone, there's one that's already hit Queensland, but there's another one off in the Coral Sea. The eye alone,
Yassi or something.
Yeah, Yassi, weird name. The eye alone is over 100 kilometres across. The cyclone is over 500 kilometres across. It looks like it is going to make landfall, and they say it's going to strengthen between what it is now, which is already huge, and by the time it hits the Queensland coast.
So how much rain are they predicting? I haven't read much about it.
Well, up in places like Rockhampton and Mackay, they're talking about potentially a metre, 800 centimetres, 1,000 millimetres of rain. I mean, that's
39 inches.
It's astonishing. Now, obviously, Queensland is already recovering from some floods, though admittedly they occurred a bit further south. But this was the thing, I spoke about this with someone the other day. They were saying with the floods, yeah, it's only the start of the wet season in Queensland.
Yes, of course. It goes right through the beginning of April.
Exactly. So, you know, you've got to say, it's going to be pretty terrible for them. So, thoughts go out to people in Queensland. Apparently, the Whitsunday Islands are being evacuated as we speak. Windows are being nailed down. It is possibly not necessarily the biggest cyclone ever, but the biggest one that will make landfall. And most cyclones take place over the ocean and don't actually hit the coast. This one is definitely...
They usually dissipate when they do hit the coast.
Exactly, but this one is going to strengthen and then hit the coast. Anyway,
the last big cyclone we had was Darwin back in the 70s, which devastated the whole of the city.
Well, it's funny how, not funny, but unusual how the year of 74 was being repeated in the year of 2010-11. You know, with the record floods in Brisbane, 74, 2010-11. Big cyclone, 74, Cyclone Tracy. And now again in 2011. So bad news.
Well, we wish them well, because the problem with the cyclone is not only just the rainfall you get, but it's the wind and the destruction and devastation that goes with it.
They're talking about winds of 180 to 200 k's an hour, which is gale force. I mean, that is the strongest force that they have on that scale. Anyway, there's a cyclone of another sort hitting the St Kilda Football Club at the moment. Now, St Kilda, sadly for it, has the reputation currently of being the worst behaved footballers. You had the nude photo scandal involving Zach Dawson, Nick Riewoldt and other players a few months ago. And now it seems that 4 players, one of which was Zach Dawson, have been found on a club trip to New Zealand to have been taking prescription drugs and alcohol when they were supposed to be training. The club has suspended all of them. But now, one thing I like about these suspensions now, the players actually have to go and get a real job while they're suspended. And Neil Mitchell here at 3AW has said, well, you know, they can come and work with me. They've got to be at work at 4:30 a.m, read the papers, get the coffee, and they have to work right through to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. This is for his morning show on 3AW. Let's see how they enjoy that sort of a job.
They won't.
I mean, Dad, you were president of the most successful football club in the history of Australian rules, Carlton. Do you think players today are better or worse behaved?
Well, they're better prepared in terms of the education they get.
Well, I keep saying that, but it doesn't seem to make much difference.
Well, it seems to me mainly it's only St Kilda that caused the trouble. But it was pretty bad back in those days. There was a lot of parties and things. But I suppose the problem now is there's so many press following AFL. There's more people in the press following AFL than follow the federal parliament.
Yes.
And the result is that every single thing becomes a headline and gets blown out of proportion.
It was interesting, the various officials at the St Kilda Football Club have said that actually there's no problem with their club culture, it's just they're a mirror of society. Well, makes me think that society is not going down too well if the St Kilda Football Club is any representation.
It's very disappointing, but and if you were an administrator at the St Kilda Football Club, you'd really be scratching your hair out and saying, what are we going to do to fix this? Because it just keeps happening down there.
My point of view, for what it's worth, and I've not been involved in senior football the way you have, but I remember when I started working in the 80s in the city, was that most footballers, or a lot of footballers, had genuine jobs. Football back then wasn't fully professional.
No.
You know, they got paid well, but not brilliantly. And most of them had other jobs. I mean, in my case, the stockbroking firm I worked at employed a number of footballers. And
Stephen Kernahan, when he came over to Carlton in 1986, he was working for a broker. He was a penciler every day.
I've got a funny story about that. On the morning of the 87 crash, I went down, this is obviously in October 87, I went onto the trading floor. And, you know, only a month earlier, Stephen Kernahan had held the Premiership Cup aloft when Carlton beat Hawthorn.
And I was on the second honeymoon.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the contrast between Stephen Kernahan at the end of September with the Premiership Cup versus Stephen Kernahan a month later when the stock market crash was going on around him, he was like a rabbit caught in the headlights. I remember him running back and forth, and it made me realise that just because you're good at football doesn't mean that we're necessarily good at working on the floor of the stock exchange.
Well, the problem was it wasn't his fault.
No one knew what was going on that day. But the point was they had real jobs, they interacted with real people, and I think they were perhaps more grounded as people. Whereas these days, young footballers, I mean, they enter the system age 15, 16.
17 or 18, but they're full-time and they've got too much time on their hands.
That's right, and they're paid a lot more money. I mean, the starting wage is more money than anybody that age would normally hope to earn. So I don't know if that's what the solution is, but I think that's part of the problem.
It is a problem. Well, I suppose we better go back to the floods, and the Prime Minister's copped a lot of flack about this levy. Fancy, she's going to raise 1.8 billion, which is nothing, in total cost. I mean, the infrastructure, they're now saying 6 to 10 billion. Then you've got all the other people. It's going to be 18 to 20, and that's without the cyclone we just talked about. I just can't believe they've made policy on the run, and it's exceptionally dumb, I think.
Well, policy on the run is often exceptionally dumb. You're quite right. I mean, if you're going to introduce a tax, you want to, prepare the ground for it. And of course, Kevin Rudd lost his job because he didn't prepare the ground for the resources super profits tax.
And they went after him.
And the Labor Party ditched him. Now, this one, it's a small tax. It's proving to be pretty unpopular. It obviously wasn't thought out. It's actually unnecessary as well. I mean, in amongst the scale of the disaster, 1.8 billion of revenue is neither here nor there. I don't know what the Prime Minister was thinking. It just suggests to me that, there is just a lack of thought. Maybe it is policy on the run. The other issue, of course, is that the government can just borrow the money. I mean, it doesn't need to go and tax people for $2 billion.
You said last week it's a lot cheaper if the government borrow the money than if people on mortgages have to borrow.
The conspiracy theory about the tax is that Bill Shorten, who was one of the so-called faceless men who stuck the knife into Kevin Rudd, he's been urging Julia Gillard to do this tax because he wants Gillard to fail. Then he'll take the top job as Prime Minister.
He won't get it.
It's only a theory, but I've heard it. Now let's just go overseas for a moment. What's happening in the Arab world is really quite amazing. And there's less than this. You've got riots in Egypt, you've had the same thing in Tunisia. It does show that countries will only change if the people in them want to change.
But what's amazing about this, Tom, is that it's the technology of Twitter and Facebook and all these things that have allowed the average Joe to all talk to each other and decide they'll have a protest and turn up.
That's right.
Without the technology, the government would still be in total charge.
Well, they say that the Berlin Wall might not have fallen back in '89 if East Germans hadn't been able to tune into West German TV and see what life was like on the other side of the wall. But you're quite right. Egypt last week actually took the step of shutting down the entire internet in the whole country, which you just cannot do that anymore. Anyway, but there's a lesson in this for countries like ours and of course the United States that want to intervene in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Those places will only change if the people in them want to change. If you try and impose change from outside, it will not work.
I think there's going to be a lot more change. They say Yemen is, which is a terrible place.
Sudan is having a secession movement.
Yeah, secession movement. I would think that all the Arab countries would be sitting there fearful. Israel sitting there very
fearful,
because Egypt's the only supporter they've had in the whole of the Middle East. The Americans are trying to sit on the fence. I think Mubarak's finished. I don't think he's got a dog's chance of maintaining. What he has to do is plan an orderly transition.
Yeah, so there isn't.
And you've got to do that quickly, or he'll have to leave the country.
Absolutely. And as I said in my market report, the oil price is going up.
That's so much for this week. We'll see you all next week. Thank you for watching.